These people who are being laid off can learn, can adapt, and then eventually succeed the same way they're succeeding in journalism now.
What do you do when someone's automated out of a job?
There's no perfect answer.
Taylor Rentz just realized, oh crap, journalism.
Yeah, everybody needs to learn code. So play this clip real quick because I think it dovetails what we're talking about. Jen and I had a great conversation out in the green room before the show about it.
The entire journalism industry is basically in a free fall. Today, the Los Angeles Times laid off 115 employees. They wiped out their entire DC bureau in an election year. They laid off pretty much all of their sports teams. They killed their entire tech and business section. They laid off breaking news writers, social media editors. The list goes on. But what's really dark is this is just the latest in months and months and months of layoffs in the media industry. In fact, tens of thousands of journalists have been laid off in the past year. Major media companies like BuzzFeed News have completely shuttered their news operations. Time magazine also just laid off a ton of people, and Sports Illustrated basically shut down last week. Pretty much the entire digital media ecosystem that myself and a lot of other millennial journalists came up in has been completely hollowed out. And it's not just digital media sites. Local news has been obliterated. The newspaper industry is cratering. Radio is essentially dead aside from NPR, which has been gutted. Meanwhile, hundreds of workers at Condé Nast, the parent company of pretty much every major magazine from GQ to Vogue to The New Yorker to Vanity Fair, are on strike because they're also facing impending layoffs. Even mainstream national media outlets owned by billionaires like the Washington Post, where I work, and The Atlantic, where I used to work, have done layoffs. If you're a young journalist today, there's almost no on-ramp to traditional journalism. Even if you do get a job, journalists' salaries have been stagnant and even declined. And by the way, we don't make that much to begin with. I don't think people understand how bad the world would be without journalists.
Okay, everything up into the last sentence there was interesting. I don't think the world.
Is this her first time realizing that this is a problem?
All right, wait, I want to make a comment. Everything she said is objectively true.
Correct.
In the sense of all the layoffs and whatnot. But what this video fails to address is the fact that AI will create other opportunities that, yes, it might not directly be journalism the way they understand it now, but there will be other opportunities in the industry or not in the industry that these people who are being laid off can learn, can adapt, and then eventually succeed the same way they're succeeding in journalism now. That is my only point about all this stuff.
No, because the point of all these guys going into journalism, from Gawker to all of it in the last 20 years, has not been journalism. It's been telling a story. It's been part of a social movement that was funded by left-wing billionaires, and they captured journalism and media. They fired because it was too expensive. News is expensive.
For sure.
And so the problem was they had ads and stuff. They couldn't adjust to it. They laid off all the old real reporters in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. Like folks that even if you knew what their political side was, or if they hated the environment, or if they hated business, or whatever it is, you knew they were fair and they were honest and they were true journalists. These guys, they're newscast anchors. I have zero concern for, and the fact that this is considered new is also offensive.
This is beyond that, and this
has
beyond.
been 20 years they've been talking about this.
It's beyond that and beyond politics. You're right in that it's not a new problem. This started with Craigslist, the death of media, and it's something that you and I have seen coming since the early 2000s. Like I'm on the record, you're on the record. It's not a new phenomenon. But this is it. This is the death rattle that we're witnessing right now. That's what she is making note of. Is the death rattle of traditional media. I don't think it's political. I think it's just bad business.
Let me ask you this: you just said it's the death of traditional media. You're right. It is the death of traditional media. You want to know why? Because I don't check traditional media.
Because
I'm 23 years old. I don't never look on the news.
Yeah, but no one
I get my
ever
news.
did.
Exactly. That's my point. That's my point.
But you don't understand that you exist within an ecosystem that has failed to adapt. The news that you do check and the news that all of us check originates with traditional media. We will feel the effects of this.
Does it originate from traditional media?
Where do you think she got all those headlines? That she's not traditional media in that delivery, right? We got the news from her on a TikTok channel.
We're talking about reporting on reporting on reporting on reporting.
That's true for sure. But if something's happening in real time, I can go on my phone right now, open TikTok, and we can all film a TikTok and report the news, with or without the traditional media, right?
Right.
No, but you have to report the news. What are you reporting? Where's the investigation?
Where's your source?
Where's
What that's my point. Like, the sources are changing. The foundations of this are changing.
The sources are not
so
changing.
Do you know what the AP
That's
is?
the problem.
Yes.
You do realize that the AP basically foreshadowed all of this. So when all those local newspapers, ones you probably haven't heard of unless you really studied journalism, like all the big ones, because they all every major city used to have 2 newspapers.
Yeah, at least.
And that was a normal thing, right? So the AP came along and they started offering these stories for sale. Because a lot of times what was happening is the New York Times, the Washington Post would write something, and then someone out in Indiana would read that, and then they'd write on it. So you were getting your news secondhand. So the AP said, we'll just rewrite all the major stories from Reuters and BBC and all these big, worldwide organizations. So companies started buying it. The problem is that meant that your local paper, if you already got the Times, the journals, to watch TV or read it long before the internet, why would you read your local paper? You read your local paper for interest stories. So they started focusing on sports. But then sports started doing it. So what happens is eventually you reach a point where you're not reading your local newspaper anyway. Why would you then care what happens? You've been reading the same direct for 30 years. You just didn't know it was under a different one, and they shrank and they shrank and they shrank.
I mean, that's the corruption of capitalism.
This is just the acceleration that occurs.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree.
The corruption of capitalism.
Yeah, I mean that's a chunk of it. The problem is that we've got something that we depend on to live in a society where the citizenry has to be at least some level of informed. We have built a country, a concept called democracy that requires that you have an informed electorate, and we have not built in a subsidy in this system that maintains the channels of information. This is like if you had created Bitcoin, but you didn't create a subsidy for miners. You have a Byzantine, non-fault tolerant system called democracy. It relies on journalism that no longer is subsidized. Hey, thanks for watching The Merge. We've got a ton more stuff for you to watch on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok, everywhere. Check us out.